Part 12 of the History of Experience is a continuation on the reflections of the self. And this time we deal with the prophets and empires. Now, prophets and empires represent the last stage in the four-phase sequence of experiential turns in this time regarding the discovery of self-reflection. So what kind of well-established practice is a result of these experiential new dimension? First of all, it is of course the person who represents this turn in experience that we call this, that we name prophet. The prophet is the author of a text, and we have already seen this is a new phenomenon. We don't have it in cosmological mythology. And the first person after Enheduanna that we have already named is the prophet Zoroaster or Zarathustra. We have a similar type in Egypt around the same period. That's the pharaoh Akhenaten. But he's interesting for several reasons. He's basically doing the same. He as a person is responsible for a religious reform, but his major setback is that he doesn't design a method. So his reform vanishes into nothing after his death. We have other prophets that have become famous and a stable institution. When we look at the prophets of Israel, people like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and so forth, we all know these people from the reading of the Old Testament. Aside from these kind of prophetic authors, we have also a new type of writer. Enheduanna is not the only one, but later on we have people like Homer, Hesiod, and Solon in Greece who become authors of a text, and they all know that they have written the text and they appear as the author of a text. We have the same phenomenon in India. All the Indian Upanishads, which are texts written in between 1000 and 500 before Christ, these texts are always associated with an author who is responsible for the content. And of course, the first author that we know from Chinese history is Confucius. Aside from these new kind of figure who plays a role in human history as the originator of reform of religious ideas, of philosophical texts, aside from that we have a new understanding of the structure of history. To remind you of the structure of history in cosmological times, we know already that history starts with creation, and from then on it's on a constant decline to the present day. Now, with the appearance of prophets, the entire scheme takes a totally different pattern, because the climax of history is associated with the life of the prophet. So we all know this from prophetic societies. The Iranian people date their existence and their historic breakthrough to the time of Zarathustra. In the Bible, it's the same phenomenon. It is Moses, the first of all prophets, who is regarded to be the one who takes Israel out of Egypt and back to the land that is promised to them for their historic existence. And the same is true when we look at the history of Islam. Islam history starts with Muhammad, the prophet. And the life of the prophet divides history in a before and after. The time before the appearance of the prophet is a time of disorder, and the time after is a time of order, of truth, in contrast to lie. And so the existence, the life of the prophet becomes a turning point of history, and we often regard Jesus Christ as another of these turns. But we will see later on that his kind of life, his working, his teaching is kind of different from what prophets do. But this will be one of our next topics. Now, when you transpose the religious approach of a prophet on the political scene, you have a different type of political order coming alive. And we have it represented for the first time with Darius the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire. Darius the Great regards himself as a representative of the Zoroastrian religion and as a first true founder of a big empire. His name is a Zarathustrian name, and in the original tongue it's called Darayavahus, he who holds firm good or goodness. So it's a kind of a virtuous person. And he who lived between 549 to 486 before Christ, he became the founder of the Persian Empire. And this transforms the lineage of dynasties into a totally different pattern as compared to cosmological myth. There we have seen that in the beginning those who started lived much longer than all the rest. And here we have the climax again with the founder of the empire. And so Darius talks like Zarathustra in the first person about his deeds. And he is the great one. I am Darius, the great king, king of kings. So he is the king of kings who unites everybody under his sovereignty. And this he says in an inscription that was hammered into the rock in Behistun. I am the king of Persia, the king of countries, the son of Hystaspes, the grandson of Arsames the Achaemenid. King Darius says, my father is Hystaspes, the father of Hystaspes was Arsames, the father of Arsames was Ariaramnes, the father of Ariaramnes was Thaspes, and the father of Thaspes was Achaemenes, the name giver to the dynasty. But he is the big one, the great king, and the climax of history. So he is here represented by the green arrow. He is the founder of an empire, and all the others are smaller than he is. So the predecessors are not bigger than the people living in the present day, but they become smaller. They are predecessors, and he is the son, the heir to all these predecessors, and he leads the empire, the growing empire, to its fullness. So the fullness is not anymore at the beginning of history, at creation, but at the center of history, where either the prophet or the founder of empire lives. And after that, there's only one chance to become even bigger, and that is by expanding the empire. So it's very strange that this kind of religion is at the same time, you know, delivering the basic idea of imperialism, because expansion is the only way to become bigger and bigger and to reduce your predecessors to the role of predecessors. And in the end, where does expansionism and imperialism ends? You know, when you have conquered the whole world. And that's what we have here. That's what the Persians have tried, to expand beyond their home area to the west and to the east. They have fought wars with the Greek and wars with the Indians, and they have tried to conquer Egypt and all the rest of the world. But we leave that for the moment, and we'll take over next time to a new turn in experience, and that is called the noetic turn, and hope to see you again with part 13.